Hello, and welcome back to my channel. I need to turn on the lights, and because I'm fancy, I have it on my phone. If it works, here we are. It's getting darker and darker over here. It's quite early in the morning, and the sun is almost out, but is not out yet. So, hence the light. How are you doing today? I really hope well. I'm sorry for yesterday's episode. I had a horrible day, and oh no, of course it happens. The important thing is not lingering with bad thoughts and stuff. But you know, with all that is going on in the world, I'm just looking forward for Christmas to come, and hopefully it will all be gone and everything will be beautiful and pink once again. Hopes. But today we are here to talk about shawls. And what is that, you may ask yourself? I never knitted a shawl myself. I am not a shawl person. But yeah, shawls are one of the biggest traditions in Venice. And as I showed you, my very own Venetian traditional costume, my tabarro, which was that big wool wheel with the lovely pins. You know what I mean. Check out one of my previous videos, and I'm still sleeping, so sorry for the rambling here. But as male wears the tabarro and wears a lot of lovely garments, the how do you say that, the embroidered white shirts and knickerbockers and socks and a hat and big bow tie and so on and so forth. The women as well have one big piece of clothing that is really knit-worthy, and we are talking about the shawls. Shawls are an everyday thing for Venetian women, and they are actually coming back fast and furious into fashion. So I'm really happy to tell you this story today. So the traditional costume, and I'm gonna look if I can find some pictures on the internet over here, or if I can get my mother to send me a picture of hers. But women wear on their dress a shawl on the top. Inside, outside, it's just a thing to cover their shoulders and so on and so forth. Shawls come to be part of the traditional costume really early in the Venetian history. As you know, Venice was an independent republic until Italy was unified, and this is a quite recent history. And so we still keep a lot of our own traditions. And back in the 17th century, if I'm correct, shawls become part of the piece of traditional clothing, or just fashion was back then. How so? Well, in the very beginning we need to talk about the word shawl, which is a translation in English of a Venetian word that is sial. That comes again from the word in Persian sal. I don't know if I pronounce well the Persian word, but you know, the Persian word sal turns into the Venetian word sial, that turns into the probably Italian word scialle, and then into the English word shawl. Why Persian? Why Venice? Well, Venice as an independent republic and was one of the bigger maritime powers, and they had commerce all over the Mediterranean Sea, and after the Mediterranean Sea into Asia, they used to commerce in silk. For example, from Persia, they used to commerce in spices from India, and so on and so forth. So one time happens that with all this commerce backward and forwards, a guy called Giovanni Zivogli, and this is the translation in Italian of his Armenian name. So this guy was from Armenia, and he had to emigrate to Venice because Armenia and all the Ottoman Empire back then was under war, and there were big battles. Wasn't safe for Giovanni and his family. So Istanbul back then, Cyprus, were kind of getting into big relationship with Venice, and Venice was the easiest, safer place to go for Giovanni Zivogli. So Giovanni takes his family and comes into Venice. And Giovanni was some weaver, and he used to weave silk and wool, and used to make fabric basically. So the Senate of the Republic gives permission to Giovanni to make square pieces of silk and wool. Only square pieces of about 90 to 1.5 meters wide. This because the Senate was afraid that having people from abroad making fabric would basically kill the indigenous production of fabric. So only allowed to make these square pieces. And of course, Giovanni was very good at making silk fabric, much better than all the Venetian people over there. They knew how to make silk fabric very well as well, but you know, the Persian flair, the Armenian flair, the Eastern type of flair on the fabric, the fantasies, the embroidery, it was completely new and different. And in a very short amount of time, these big square pieces of fabric became really popular among all Venetian women. And they started wearing these pieces of fabric, these big napkins, let's say, on their shoulders. Because they heard stories and they saw depiction of women from Persia, from Armenia, from what will be Turkey, wearing big scarf on the top of their head, on the top of their shoulders, as it was costume there. So as now, like American or British fashion, or Italian fashion, or French fashion is seen as different and becomes into your own mass culture, so it was in Venice. Women started wearing these big pieces of fabric on their shoulders, as it was fashion in the East. And it became a thing. And as the Persian word sal became the Venetian word sial. And they call it sial, and they just had these beautiful shows. And slowly that became part of our traditional costume. Originally, back in the 17th centuries, they were bright in color, with very long fringes and massive gold embroidery and silver. They were really precious. There were stones embroidered within the fabric, precious stones, precious metals, pieces of mirror, and so on and so forth. By the way, in a bracket, just another little nudge on the Venetian culture. Do you know that Venice had the monopoly and the secret, owned the secret of making mirrors for about a couple of centuries? And everybody that spilled the beans, as they say, or that taught abroad how to make a mirror, were punishable by death penalty in Venice. Until someone got kidnapped by the French court, the French king, that was Louis XVI, if I'm right, or 15, one of the two. And yeah, they actually tortured this poor mirror maker in France, and he had to tell how to make mirrors. So for the first time, after a century, Venice didn't have anymore the monopoly of mirrors, but this is just a little bracket. So, big colorful shows and very, very beautiful. Venice is still a really colorful city, and clothing of the people actually mirrored the color of the city. Everything that was from the east came into Venice as big fashion trends. If you think about all the colors from India and Pakistan and Turkey and Greece, they all came into Venice as just fashion trends, basically. Until though, we have a big war in Venice. A big war for conquering a couple of islands, a couple of territory in the Mediterranean Sea, including Istanbul. And this war ended with the Battle of Lepanto that saw thousands of Venetians die for the war. We don't remember still the Battle of Lepanto as a big date in our calendar, but in my opinion we should, because it's still part of our history and part of who we are, and a lot of family has still memories of all the relatives that fought those battles, even if it's a couple of hundred years from now. Anyway, after that battle, the Venetian Senate decided to stop all the color and put the city into a massive mourning period. So, for example, gondolas that we all know now, they are those beautiful slanted tiny boats that are really characteristic of Venice. They are black. That's why they're so beautiful. Before that decree from the Senate, they were colorful and full of gold again. Now the Senate says all the gondolas must be black with minimum use of gold or golden paint or any other color. All the clothing must be black with a very minimum use of gold or other colors. And all the shawls as well had to be black. And the rule for the shawls was even further imposing on women. So, you know how I said the shawls in Venice are square and they have big, long fringes. So, shawls have been cut enough, they are triangular now. And we don't want big, long fringes, but we just want very short 15 centimeter fringes top. And that became part of the shawl fashion for the 3 years that the Senate decided to keep the mourning. But, you know, after a war, a city is quite poor, has to rebuild themselves, and black shawls were really usable, not just for noble people or higher class people, but even for poorer people. And there was much easier to find black fabric, black dye, and then black wool for poorer people. And so the tradition kept on, and now as well, all Venetian shawls are triangular, are black, and have very short fringes. But they always have fringes. That's something I haven't seen on other shawls, to be honest. Anyway, this is kind of very shortly the history of the Venetian shawl costume. How comes that now mothers, grandmothers, people knit shawls? Well, originally shawls, as Giovanni came from Armenia with his skills in weaving silk and very sheer wool fabric. They were basically silk. They were very expensive, very refined, very fine wool. They became everyday after the war of Lepanto, everyday wearing for literally everybody in the society. And wool fabric was expensive for peasants and poor people. So the easiest way was to get some wool yarn and make it your own. So they came up with beautiful patterns, with lace, with embroidery, that made a lot of sense in the economy of the family, and as well create all this beautiful array of Venetian shawls that we have now. Unfortunately, and I'm kind of appealing to anybody that have the knowledge of the power here, as you know, Shetland lace and Shetland shawls are very famous and they are very well documented. Venetian shawls are not famous outside Venice, and they are absolutely not documented at all. We don't have, as far as I'm aware, a depository of patterns for Venetian shawls. We don't have patterns available on Ravelry or a decent history. All the informations that I told you come from part the stories that my family gave me and passed through generations, and part from a little bit of research on some books on the history of Venice that I could find. But I couldn't find much else. So the appeal is, if you know about anything related to Venetian fashion and you would like me to help with, you know, English translations, translating from Venetians, whatever, I'll be happy to support this type of research, let's say. If I had studied fashion myself, or design, or another more creative university than law, I would probably choose this as a topic for a thesis. But anyway, if you know anything about that, let me know. I'll be really happy to learn more, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye bye.